Hi everybody, this is my talk about ultrasonic sound and recording it and using it and stuff. The title is an obscure reference to a Flanders and Swan song, and I used the wrong wording. Anyway, I'm pressing the wrong thing there. Here we go. Sorry, I have two computers. Yeah, this is me. I'm a game audio designer. I run a studio called Supertonic. We're an external game audio services company, I suppose you could say. Essentially, we're contractors for game audio for studios that aren't big enough to have their own audio department. And we're doing some cool things and working with cool people, which is very nice. That was meant to be updated. Yes, so to begin, I thought I should probably actually explain what ultrasound is for anyone in the audience who doesn't know. So before we can do that, we need to know what sound is, which is essentially some vibrating body or resonator moves slightly, and this actually hits air molecules and creates these waves of compressed and rarefied air, and that travels through the air in a ripple, and then that hits other things, especially our eardrums, and then that gets converted into what is really sound, because before that it's this sort of acoustic energy and air pressure, and sound is what we perceive, really. So that's a very brief overview. Wrong computer again. So sound, then, is normally recorded very simply. This is a dynamic microphone. This is just one type of microphone, but it's the simplest to understand. So essentially, your sound waves come along through the air. They hit a diaphragm at the front of the microphone, and that diaphragm is moved by the waves. The diaphragm is attached to a magnet which moves back and forth around, with a coil around it, or you move the coil and not the magnet. And this then generates an electrical signal, much like how a generator or turbine works, right? And this is an AC signal because every sort of bounce in is followed by a bounce out, and this creates an alternating current signal, which we can then convert into audio information. And then basically you play it back by doing the reverse thing. You send that electrical signal into a speaker, it moves, the magnet moves the coil, which moves the diaphragm, which creates the sound, right? So, how then do I remember to use the lectern instead of my laptop? How then do we look at ultrasound? So what is ultrasound? Essentially, ultrasound is anything, I don't have to hold that anymore, anything that is greater than 20 kilohertz, which is the limit of human hearing. And that's not really the limit of human hearing for everybody here. That's for children, really. Everyone, musicians especially, will have quite a bad roll-off there. I fortunately can still hear up to about 17 kilohertz, despite having been a drummer for a long time. But essentially, ultrasound keeps going. So by the time you get up to that's sort of closer to the megahertz range, that's your ultrasonic cleaners and stuff. And also your ultrasonic, ultrasound detection. That's my unborn child. If I suddenly get a phone call, I'm just going to drop this talk and go straight to the airport. So I apologize for that if that happens. But yeah, and so that's sort of then where we use sonar technology, essentially, using ultrasound waves, bouncing those and seeing what comes back, and that's how we get these. Oh, thank you. Most kind. No, that's still slippery. Never mind. Yeah, so yeah, that's sort of what ultrasound is, right? So that's technically anything that's above that, right? It's a very, very broad sort of category of sound, and it's a bit weird when I was doing research into this because, when you look at definitions for, high frequency or ultra-high frequency or very high frequency, which are, wavelengths we use for radio waves or broadcasting television and stuff, those are all up in the megahertz, and I'm trying to, look for, very high frequency sound, which, of course, by, in terms of radio waves and other wavelengths and stuff, is actually all very low frequency, despite being above the range of human hearing. So it's actually kind of a difficult thing to research. But anyway, why do we even want to record ultrasound in the first place? So this is a recording of my camera shutter. And that is playing at normal speed. We can see a spectrograph there of the audio information up to 20 kilohertz, right? that's what we're recording normally when we're recording 44.1, or 48K is a little bit above that. But really, if we slow that right down, right, we'll end up with it sounding like this. Which is, the great kind of thing we do in sound design all the time. But that's because we captured only up to 20 kilohertz. Once we capture everything above that we can actually hear way more high detail. Which doesn't sound like a camera anymore, but it's got all this high-frequency content detail that we'd lost because we weren't capturing all the ultrasound there when we stretched it out, right? So if we, there's a problem of actually capturing this ultrasound, right? So there are multiple reasons for this. One is that essentially a regular microphone diaphragm is heavy. It's not like heavy, but it's like kind of like a pendulum or a swing, right? They've got a certain amount of inertia because it's a thing on a spring, right? And if you try to push that at like its resonant frequencies or at like, low frequencies, it's going to vibrate very nicely. If you try and push that really fast, it's not going to do much against the inertia of that mass, right, that's moving. So a lot of the time, when you capture stuff with a regular microphone, the diaphragm simply is not vibrating at that high frequency. That gets dampened out by the physical properties of the diaphragm. So to capture ultrasonic sounds, you need a very lightweight, thin, small diaphragm. The other thing, of course, is that that's on this scale, when we look at linear, that's piano low C down there at about, I can't remember, 262 hertz or something. 7 octaves up to piano at the top C of a piano. If you get one more octave from there, you're there. One more octave from there. One more octave again and again. And then suddenly you're up to 128 kilohertz, and that's enormous, right? So like this whole range, these 7 octaves of the piano take place way down, down here. And so like, you get diminishing returns because you need higher and higher sample rates to capture higher and higher frequencies, and it takes up more data, like all these things sort of compound, and essentially you're working harder and harder to get a little bit more ultrasound at each step, right? So basically, I don't want to dive right into the Nyquist theorem, but basically to represent a sound or a waveform in digital space, in the digital domain, you need at least 2 samples per cycle of the waveform. So here, this red line you could not capture with the sample rate. If the sample rate of these black bars, right? The black dotted waveline you could capture, right? Because for each up and down, it at least gets somewhere on the up, somewhere on the down. And then a computer, well, a digital to digital to analog converter, or analog to digital converter in this case, will convert that into the smooth, pure, nice waveform. It's actually a fallacy that we have these like stepped waveforms around low sample rates and things. Like we take the data points and we reconstruct, and if you don't have enough of those, you end up with aliasing and artifacting and misinterpretation of the data. It's not actually a chunky waveform. It all comes out smooth, essentially. So all these things together. Oh yes, another thing. Like the gold standard for ultrasound recording for sound designers and such is the Sanken CO100K. It's very nice. It's got a flat frequency response. It is very sensitive. Studio quality microphone. Very good. Yeah. It's very expensive, and studios can afford this kind of thing. Hobbyists and contractors and people maybe not. So that sort of got me thinking, could I make a world-class microphone myself? Maybe not, but essentially I tried. So I learned to make the simplest circuit in the world, which is their Simple P48. I found a tiny electret condenser microphone that was of decent quality and which had very, very small, flimsy electret diaphragm, which is very lightweight. I wired it up. There it is. That's actually not a bad result, right? That is better than any studio mic I own. You know, I've got mics in the thousands of dollars, and they can't do this because they're not designed for it. And so this cheap thing that I threw together for like less than $100 in parts worked out pretty well for me. So how do I go from there? I'm going to blitz through this because it was a very long process. It's taken me about 2 years. But I thought, you know, I'll just have to learn a bit about electronics, just a bit. So learning about shelving filters because I want to increase that high frequency, learning how to do circuit simulation so I can look at that, you know, figure out all the values for that, do the maths and go, oh wait, actually we need an active one because if we have a passive filter then that only makes things quieter and then we'll have, you know, higher noise floor and okay, so I'll do active, all right, but that means I need to have an op amp and that means I need to learn to bias an op amp using phantom power but also bias the microphone capsule because electret condenser mics need about, you know, 1 to 3 volts of power to run. So this became quite non-trivial. This was my first attempt at making this new microphone work. There's still some problems there, clear. And that looks like this. So it's, yeah, so that's a tiny, like that's a microchip that a human is not supposed to solder. Like that's for machines to do, but not that smart. So yeah, so I made this. Remarkably, it worked, and it did improve things, but it's ridiculous. So I've got to make that smaller. Okay, so now I've got to learn to do circuit board design. And then figure out that actually it's very hard to source particular components and to have them fit there. There's a lot to it. Anyway, I made a thing, my first circuit board, hooray. There's the op amp there, it's nicely soldered on by a robot. Yeah, there it is. I put it in an old body from Aldi. And the white line is the new prototype, the blue line was the old original. So, significant improvement in the ultrasonics. But could it be better? Anyway. I did a lot more stuff, looking into body design, how the shape of the microphone affects the acoustic wavefront and everything. I'm still working on that. And then I came up with this. Hooray, there it is. In person. Thank you. And this one, here's a spectrograph showing the difference between the original and my new circuit. You can see it's a lot more sensitive, so it's a louder signal. This is just the two of them next to each other with a little burst of compressed air. And you'll see that there are frequencies going all the way up to 96K and off the top on the one on the right-hand side, as opposed to the original, which sort of really tapered off by the time it got up past 80. So, yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that, even though there's still some things I need to work out on it. Anyway, yes, that's sort of a diversion. The thing that I am most excited to actually talk to you all about is what working on the ultrasound scale is like, because it's not always intuitive, and it does some really weird things. So when you slow stuff down, you end up with, obviously, the time. So a sound takes longer to happen. All the timing changes. The perceived mass of objects increases, and it increases by like the square cube law. Thank you. And so, you know, for each sort of doubling in time is similar to doubling the length of one side of the object. And so you can get things that sound quite small, like jangly keys, to sound like a giant drawbridge chain quite quickly. It also affects the sense of acoustic space. So like you try to record something in what appears to be a fairly dead room, a fairly small room, and suddenly it sounds cavernous with a big echo after it, which is interesting. Rigidity is a fun one because if you ever look at like, you know, those super slow-mo videos of things that seem really solid and then like they get hit and they're sort of like, it sounds like that too. Stuff that like feels really solid suddenly becomes like quite sort of floppy, which is really, really weird. Continuity is a really fun one. I got some good examples for that, but essentially there are so many sounds that we hear which rely on being like a series of transients that happen quickly enough together that your brain perceives it as a tone. And when you slow those down, you just have the series of transients. You don't have a tone anymore, which is weird. synchronicity, I've got an example I will play you of a typewriter. Yeah, that's probably a good time to do this. So I've got two mice, got two things. I will show you this. Hello, wake up. Hopefully we can hear this. Okay, so this is a typewriter I bought in an op shop. First I'll play it at full speed, and then at half, and then at a quarter, and then at an eighth. That's a bell about this big, which now sounds like a church bell, which is wild. But I absolutely I find this stuff really fascinating. But that's where synchronicity comes in, where hitting those typewriter keys feels so like precise and mechanical, and when you slow it down, it's like, you know, all these sounds sort of like start feeling way less in sync. Stuff that you're like, yeah, things you hit at the same time, just everything becomes a flam. Another one I don't have an example for you here is directionality. So actually, like, one of the big problems with designing this microphone is that many capsules like this are omnidirectional. So they have no particular rejection of sound that comes from the sides or from behind, which means you need to operate them in a very quiet space and a very well-treated space and things to really get the most out of them, or you'll pick up a whole lot of ambient noise and things. But it turns out that when you get up to really high frequencies, that directionality increases a whole lot. So the sounds that are directed towards it will reach it more than sounds that are sort of like, if I'm facing away from you, more of the low frequencies will make it over there, fewer of the high frequencies will. And as you get into ultrasonics, it becomes really quite directional, which is also very not terribly intuitive. And then stereo image, because I studied music production and audio engineering at QT, and we had all these things we learned about recording music and instruments and stuff, and we had a lot of stereo microphone recording techniques. And a lot of them rely on things like having two microphone capsules and putting them right next to each other in an XY configuration, and then we treat that essentially as if they're occupying the same point in space, because they're so close that you don't get any sort of phase interactions and issues of those kinds. But when you slow it right down to 1/8 speed, suddenly that's more like putting them like here, and really the difference in time between a single wavefront reaching one, reaching the other, depending on the angle that it's coming from, can suddenly create destructive phase interference, and then your stereo image sounds weird. And if you're recording like with a binaural type setup with a spaced pair, right, you put it where your ears sort of distance are apart, well, actually it's like a head 8 times bigger than yours, and it's, yeah, the perception of like where things are in a stereo image just gets completely out of whack. So it's all stuff to kind of look out for, but it's also just really kind of fun and weird stuff about working in this bizarre domain. So I thought if I have any brave members in the audience, I might do some live demos with this shiny microphone. Does anybody have like a particularly weird noise they can make? I see one hand go up. I see a couple. Okay. You three, please, if you may. I'll get set up for that. Yes, please, our brave volunteers. So something I will warn you, actually, I didn't mention before, is that when you start recording an ultrasound, you start discovering there are a lot of very high-frequency noises around the place. So in my brief test just a moment ago, I picked up there is a very distinct hum at just about 20 kilohertz in this room. So there'll be some weird stuff that comes out. don't, I guess, particularly judge the microphone on its performance here, but I really wanted to just sort of show how, like, what you can do with very little treatment or anything, or processing. All right.
Would you like a monster sound or something like that?
Yeah, whatever you like. Just get up, fairly nice and close. I'll tell you if you're clipping.
Okay. Let's see.
Go for it.
I haven't prepared anything.
That's great, but it did peak. So can you do that again, like a step back? Yeah, just
one more time.
Yeah.
I'll do it exactly the same.
Okay. Yes, please.
I did it again.
All right, it did peak again, but let's look at that anyway. All right, so I'm just going to trim it down to these. All right, so I think actually you were louder the second time. Maybe. Anyway, okay, we'll have a listen back to that. I think this should work, hopefully. Bit of fun. And let's just see what happens when we slow that down a bit. So normally I'll do something like resampling with sample tag changing. So essentially there's a non-destructive type of editing you can do where you take a recording that was recorded at 196,000 samples per second and just tell the computer, no, this is a 44 recording or a 48 recording, and it will just play it back slower, and you don't do any destructive editing there. Here I will do a bit, which is really just time stretching, just to give the example. So here's that, again, 1 octave down. And hear that?
Oh, yeah.
I'm very sorry about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if my volume here will actually affect the volume there either, so I don't... Actually, I can...
Just use RX.
I will just use RX. What am I talking about? What are we doing? Yeah, okay, let's gain that down. Let's go down. Let's not go up 30. Let's go down 6, or... Yeah, let's try 6. All right, and then we can... Did I slow that down again yet? No, I don't think so. All right, let's drop that again. So this would be at quarter speed. Yeah, so our highest captured frequency is still above 20 kilohertz here at a quarter speed.
That's awesome.
And you can hear that ringing again, unfortunately. And again, I generally like to push things down to 1/8 speed, which seems wrong because you're like, well, your highest captured frequency is now just above 10 kilohertz. But there's still it's still really usable in a sound design sense. So let's hear that. Which is pretty cool, I think you'll admit. Thank you, Jeff. Alrighty. I'm going to keep this just because that's going to be a useful thing then, really. Alrighty, step up if you please. Yeah, probably about that distance would be good. And give us a noise.
Oh, yes, we could. Spoiling us fish. Give it to us. And ready. Yes, nice chips.
All right, let's have a look at the nasty chips. Cool. Let's start with this.
Kid, spoiling us fish.
I'm going to do that bit just because it's got some really nice sibilance in it. Cool. So that's a good level. So we won't need to take that down. Where did I lose my variable pitch there? Cool. So down 1 octave.
Fish.
I'm so sorry about that tone, but that is just electrical noise in this space. And yeah, hear that enormous cavernous reverb of this room. Yeah, so you get the idea, I think. Yeah, thank you very much. Cool, and great. Yeah, so just once again, if you can get like a foot-ish back from the mic and give us a weird noise if you can. Very good, thank you. I think this is going to be a good example of that sense of continuity because it's quite a croaky sound. So. So the thing I find really interesting about this mic, or bad maybe, is that it sounds so gross to use at a normal pitch because I've really just put everything into emphasizing those upper frequencies and trying to keep that flat. So everything, all the sibilance is just so disgusting. It's just, I would not use this as a vocal mic for normal recording at this stage. I wonder if I can just de-hum that real quick. Let's grab just that camera, just that bit. That should be a little bit better. All right. So, and then we can slow it down again to a quarter. And then down an eighth, I think you'll find that some of those really croaky bits start sounding less vocal. Yeah. I did have a couple of just like pre-prepared ones to show you as well, just for fun. This was, I'm sorry if you don't like gross things, maybe block your ears for this one. This is a burp. So that was when I was, something I came across when I was trying to design a giant burp for a monster, and just realized I can't just pitch this down because burps don't sound like burps when they're slow anymore. It's just like dock, 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 which was really, really bizarre. To imitate that, I ended up then speeding up the burp, imitating the sound of that, and then doing that. So that's what this sounds like. It's good fun. That's going. Yeah. And then I think there was one more. Oh, no, I don't need to show you that because I've got that. Well, I was going to. Yeah, I can demo that. We got time, probably. I don't know what time it is.
12:33.
Oh, wow. Who knew? Which is what I'd prepared in case I didn't have any brave volunteers. I'm just going to run that de-hum first this time. How about that? Cool. Maybe I should... it doesn't pick it up. This is, in fact, a good time maybe to talk about the difficulties of processing then ultrasonic recordings, because most audio software is not... It doesn't care about it. We will get back to that, but yeah, well, look, I'll play it back and then de-hum it when it's in an audible range. Oops, missed the honk. Anyway, you know what it sounded like. You were there. You were there when it happened. So let's grab that. That. Then we'll grab the de-hum. There it is. Just slam that. Oh, come on. It's not loving it. I'm sorry, that's the best we'll do. All right, so this is half speed. And then at a quarter. And you'll notice that the honk really starts to, like the pig toy, starts to just, become a series of transients because of the way that it functions. Sounds like a motorbike. Well, not a motorbike, but a lawnmower. It's the little paper rolling up at the end. There you are, yeah. Thank you. I think it's surprising how usable sounds are even after they've been squished down stretched out. So the highest represented frequency is just over like 10 kilohertz. It's great to have that extra sibilance up the top. With my hardware that I can afford, I can still only record up to 192K, which means the highest frequency I can record is 96 kilohertz. There are ones available that can go up to 384. They're normally used for more like scientific research and things. And then there are some audio-focused ones for audiophiles who are foolish enough to believe that capturing those high frequencies will do them any good. Yes, dealing actually with these recordings then has its own sort of set of processes, which, were also kind of counterintuitive to me at first. So generally, I want to say don't trust audio plugins in general. Test everything, see how it affects stuff, because you'll often find that, say, for example, in RX, I had to find some very specific settings. Oh, actually, yeah, I could show you that like right now. Maybe I won't. Yeah, why not? So in RX, for example, if I go grab this really clipped out one. Here we go. All right, we'll take this back to its initial state. So generally, you notice there's a lot of high frequency noise up here. Some of this is like self noise from the system, from the microphone. Some of this is ambient ultrasonic noise. It's sometimes difficult to differentiate. And it's, I need some access to better sort of testing facilities to really properly tune that. But generally, if you're wanting to sort of like denoise a recording, right, in RX or something, normally you just denoise it, right? So we'll use like a spectral denoising thing, we'll grab this bit, we'll learn what the noise profile is, and then we'll sort of apply that to everything. But by default, RX's settings do a whole lot of sneaky things because this is a sort of a magic piece of software and it tries to make things be good. But I had to read up on how it actually functions, to some degree anyway, to a level of understanding that I could get behind. But essentially, it has a bunch of functionality in there which does things like resynthesis and whitening of sound and like adding little bits of like ultrasonic noise because it sort of patches up gaps in waveforms and things. So it actually not only doesn't care about what's happening in the ultrasonics, so like you won't clean that up with it, but it also can add additional artifacts and unwanted processing. So you don't want to be doing that. This is where generally I will do the resampling and we'll change it just by tag, bring it down to 48. The whole thing is now just filed as just being read in a different frequency. So now highest frequency is above 20K. And it's just, the slowed down thing. Sorry, I forgot to drop that again. But once you're in this range, suddenly you can do all of your normal processing again. So we can do our denoising and so on. I am going to start with that dehum, just because that is the worst thing ever. I think it's found it. There we go. Oh, come on, go again. Try harder. Yeah, that'll do. So yeah, let's drop that down. And then we can declip this even, right? Or give it a crack anyway, see how that goes. So we'll like try and, for anyone who doesn't know what that is, we can take, I'm actually really impressed, even like Audacity has this functionality now, which is pretty damn cool. But we can take anything that's like this, a waveform which has clipped out, and it's reached the top of what it can capture and just flatten because there's no more headroom there for capturing that data, right? And what we can do is we can sort of reinterpret where those would have overshot to. So we give that a go. There we go. That's sort of reconstructed a bit. How does that sound now? So there's still some of that distortion and clipping there, but it's helped a bit. And then we can grab all of this stuff. We can do a spectral denoise. You won't like terribly notice probably in this environment just because it's a bit sort of noisy and echoey and stuff anyway. But we can, then do sort of regular processing we would do because there are no ultrasonics up there for it to ruin. And then, when we're done with this, we can just sort of set that sample tag back again, and then we've got the original file, so play back the original speed, but we've done all our processing at a different speed. So then we've managed to take out some of this ambient noise and stuff without harming our ultrasonic signal. And then we just change that tag back to 192. Bim, bam, boom. All right. Let's jump back to the slides. So, yes, beware your audio plugins and audio software because it is not designed for dealing with ultrasonic sound. Some plugins, like I remember back at uni when people were asking why I recorded a high sample rate when we're not going to hear it, which is the same sentiment as the thing I took this title from. All the highest notes neither sharp nor flat, but the ear can't hear as high as that. Still, I'm sure to please any passing bat. But the sentiment there is that, well, more data is good. And so plugins and things that do processing, if they have more data going into them, can be more effective. And maybe, to some degree, that is true, but they're not using that data to influence or preserve ultrasonic signal. They're using that for only the stuff that's within the hearing range. So just, do some tests, do your effect, slow things down, have a look at spectrographs and waveforms and see whether you're sort of modifying ultrasonics where you don't want to be. But also, you can slow things down and then use those processes and then speed it back up again. That is what I was saying here. Yes, and it also makes it, not more lightweight, but it's means it can be handled by a lot of things that are just not designed to do it. RX can handle a 192K file and do stuff with it. Other things will complain at you. And then multiband processing is also really good here, so that if you don't want to be affecting ultrasonics, or you only want to be affecting ultrasonics, you can band stuff out and just ignore that. So I've got, a lot of the time I will do some low multiband expansion, so that I'm only getting really low bass frequencies when there is other signal happening. And then any sort of baseline level of noise will get more sort of squashed down. And that kind of stuff is really handy because if you're trying to do that kind of processing for noise removal and stuff, you can sort of lose some of that ultrasonic signal if you're accidentally processing that as well. Storage is another problem because it's, as I said, you get diminishing returns the higher and higher sample rates you use. And so storage takes up, quadruple a 48K file for a 192K file. And honestly, unless you have this microphone or a Sierra 100K, there are a number of other ones out there, you're not probably going to be capturing quite up to those highest frequencies. So I think it's always good when you're sort of mastering your recordings, doing your own little Foley recordings and things and adding them to your library. As you process those, check, is there actually any signal above 60K, above 48K? If there's nothing above 48K, just make it a 96K file. You're done. It's, you don't need to have all that extra information because it does nothing. Don't listen to the audio files. It does nothing. So that's a handy thing for just saving space because you will end up using up a lot of space with all this stuff. The other thing is, trying to use the laptop again. essentially you can't use lossy compression formats to store ultrasonic recordings because lossy formats are very clever and they get rid of extraneous data that is not necessary. And so if you've got an MP3 or something, one of the many, many very clever processes it does is it just like does a bandpass at, I think it's 20K? It might even be slightly lower than that. And all that information is completely lost. And it's just lossy, so you cannot get that back once it's been converted. FLAC is a lossless format. It's not like a great compression ratio. It's only like 2 to 1, essentially. But once you've got a big library of things of 192K, squashing that down in half is quite good. It does have the drawback that like not everything supports FLAC. Fortunately, RX and Reaper and everything I use, oh, good, thank you, does support it, and so that's very handy for me. But yeah, just be wary of that, because not everything will. But you can always convert it back out when you're using it somewhere. So that's a good thing for storage. But yeah, don't use compression formats that are lossy in any way, because they will not preserve ultrasonic frequencies. And then, oh yeah, this is one I actually sort of thought was a little bit counterintuitive, but became really useful to me, which is that if you're using an ultrasonic sound because you want to do a whole lot of stretching with it in-game or like in a sampler or something, then these things may not want to deal with a really high sample rate sound. They might automatically downsample that or something. So what I do is actually just stretch it out with like either a sample tag change or however to stretch that out into a 48K file, pop it in there, and then tell it to play back sped up a lot to be normal, and then let it slow down for when you want it to be really deep and capturing all of that cool stuff. And that's just a handy thing to do because things like game engines are really handy in that they can run multiple sample rates concurrently, which is really great because we can just play stuff back at different speeds like a tape machine. It's wonderful. But, you know, so you can just go, yeah, okay, I'll give you a 48K file, but just play it really fast, okay? That pretty much wraps up what I have to say there. But if you did have interest in getting one of these, or just like give me some feedback on it, or just interested in its further development, there's an expression of interest there. My contact details are on the next slide. You can email me or Twitter me or Blue Sky me or whatever. I'm sort of, I think I will be making up and selling a bunch of these sort of prototypes at this stage, but I am working towards making something a little bit more sort of finalized and finished in the future because, you know, audio people love their shiny toys. So yeah, that's all. If you have any questions, pop your hand up and we'll bring a microphone to you because this is being recorded and we'd like to hear what you have to say in the future.
Thank you. That was excellent. I'd love to try one out. I actually do have a C100K, and I suspect that Skywalker Sound are going to send assassins after you now because it's been there. No, seriously. Once you start playing around with it, you realise that almost every really cool monster sound you've heard is literally just somebody's puppy. And I'm not kidding. But I would love to. I would love to support you by purchasing one. But I'd also love to compare it with the C100K. And from that point of view, I'll talk to you afterwards. But from that point of view, if you want some data from a C100K to compare, I'm more than happy to help you out with that as well.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I am actually. My intention for this from the get-go essentially was to create something that was more than half as good for less than half the price. And I think I'm like already there in terms of like at least half as good quality. I haven't on my most recent prototype done a comparison with a CR100K, but as I continue, I'm still iterating on the circuit design and sort of making improvements here and there. So I'm, definitely looking forward to comparing that.
How long does it take you to make one currently? Because I've already got the circuit boards printed and things, and I've got a few parts lying around, it takes me like
half a day, I guess, but like a lot of that is, or maybe a full day, because a lot of that is dealing with this plumbing pipe and, sort of filing that down and putting that together.
I will warn you that once word gets out, you're going to have to hire people to help you, because there's a few companies like the geophones and stuff like that, that if anybody's looked into some of the smaller people making those sort of niche microphones, most of the people can't keep up with demand. So
LOM always do those, like, they'll announce a drop and they'll
Yes.
be like, yes, okay, everyone know you will be able to order for this brief window.
yes, I got one by staying up till like 2 o'clock in the morning. So, but thank you, that's excellent, and great work on the microphone too.
Yes, thank you for that. We've got one in the front here. Or
In the beginning slides, you had a response curve for this mic. What did you use as a reference for those?
Oh, yeah. So those is not actually like, unfortunately, like a proper reference. It is literally like computer duster gas, because it's the only thing I could find which had not like a flat response, but had at least signal in every frequency band. And so I was using that to compare various prototypes and things so that I could at least benchmark them against each other. And yeah, I've done a similar thing with like a CO100K, but only on a previous thing, and I need to record the same burst because it's not a great tool for making white noise. Yeah.
I'm a little curious about how this might work with impulse response or convolution. Like you're talking about distorting space and time, and if you had any experiments with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love making impulse responses. I want to get better at it, and I started going down that rabbit hole, and there's a lot to it. There's also, in trying to make something to test this, to create like a perfect impulse, it is both difficult and dangerous to like the best outcomes. But yeah, these types of like high frequency microphones, like in the like scientific domain, are often used by like architects and people to make a scale model recorded at a really high sample rate and then use that to measure the acoustics of what the space will be when it's at full scale. So you absolutely can do that. I've made a few like weird experimental convolution reverbs with this by recording in spaces with like patently bad acoustics where there's like a weird room flutter. And when that's slowed down, it becomes like a really wacky like delay. So there's a lot of fun space to be explored there, but I've only, just gotten to the tip of the iceberg. Anybody else? Oh, yeah, in the front.
I'm wondering if you think there would be any benefit to a subsonic microphone?
That is a really interesting question. I have like briefly looked into it. The way that, because this has all essentially been done in my spare time, of which I do not have a lot, which is why it's taken a couple of years, is that, every time I've got a list of things I'd like to investigate, and I know I need to like use my hyperfocus for good and just like focus it like drilling down into learning only what I need to know to make this one thing work. But subsound, like infrasonic sound is also really fascinating and difficult to capture in its own way, and it's just not something I've got any tools yet to properly investigate. But you're absolutely right, there is interesting stuff down there. In the dark, waiting to come out. Anybody else?
I have like a vague childhood memory of my wacky uncle having a bat detector. Are you aware of those and how they work? And does that relate at all to what you're doing? I think it's slightly different the way it works, though.
Well, I mean, like the modern ones are just like digital things, like a housing and an Arduino and a tiny electric condenser mic, or actually a MEMS microphone, which are the tiny ones that they use in like like on your smartphone and stuff, use MEMS capsules, which I had also looked into, but generally they've got a higher noise floor. They essentially, of all the ones I've looked into and investigated, like most of them don't care too much about noise floor or sound quality. They're only interested in whether they can capture that because that gives them all the data they need. So like they're great tools for if you don't have anything with higher fidelity, and they can record up to super high sample rates. So there are little things that record up to 384K, which would be really great. I'd love that, except that even if I could plug this into it, which I can't, the analog to digital converter in that is not necessarily of a high enough standard to really get a professional result. That all? We good? All right. Thank you all so much for coming and listening to me.